What's some of the bad advice that you got?
I literally was told, quite honestly, by a VP of HR, not to communicate my plans to have further children, or my desire to, and to keep my personal life personal. Don't let it enter into the workplace. When you're here, you should be buttoned up. I started working when women weren't allowed, like in the personnel manual, women weren't allowed to wear pants to work. They had to wear hosiery with their dresses and suits. Yes.
Okay, so for just to put that into perspective.
Welcome to the Narrow Spaces Podcast, a limited engagement masterclass where leaders are invited to share their lessons learned and experiences in navigating those narrow spaces of work and life. We are creating a true masterclass in leadership. When the space between work and life is narrow, balance is impossible. I want to encourage you to be brave enough to lead in the narrow spaces.
Our guest today is Debra Squyres, Chief Customer Officer for Bonusly. In her role, she combines her passion for an exceptional customer experience with her drive to empower companies to connect, motivate, and engage their employees to build winning enterprises and workplaces. Prior to Bonusly, Debra was VP of CS at Beamery and the Chief Client Officer at Namely. I like these names, just to name a few. She has over 30 years of experience in senior leadership, roles ranging from in-house HR leadership to HR consulting, outsourcing, client services, and customer success, working directly with HR teams across a variety of industries. She currently resides in Fort Worth, Texas, with her husband and 2 dogs. Let's meet Debra. All right, Debra, I want to know, what's something that people might be surprised to know about you as a leader?
Interesting. I think that I take to heart more so what happens to people and what their experience is than I may show on the outside. I have always worked to keep my emotion and my kind of empathy inside, and it's something that I've had to really work on feeling comfortable expressing. I think I've more so come to terms with that in the last probably 5 years or so. But I tend to be somebody who puts my head down, sings the company song, kind of pushes us forward. And I think oftentimes people aren't aware of how much I take home with me, how much I think about the impact of the work that we do and what it has, like the impact it has on people within the company, within customers. I'm constantly thinking about that.
Well, it seems like within your work, your work and even your work history, it places you as a partner to the people who are using their talents every day to do a job. And in this idea of the narrow spaces of work and life, when there's not harmony, when there is unnecessary or unproductive or unresolved friction, more and more people take it home. So tell us a little bit about what you have learned about the way that you navigate the narrow spaces of work and life when you're taking things home.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I realized many years ago is that work-life balance is actually not a thing, that you have to find a way to harmonize. And for many years, I tried really hard to compartmentalize. And I wasn't successful at it, but I tried very hard to figure that out. I'll also say I was impacted by when I started working. So I'm a mom. My son is 30, though. So I started my career in the early 90s. I had my son before FMLA was enacted. And so I was in my formative career years at a time when there wasn't an opportunity to blend things the way that you can today. And so what I've learned is that you really have to meet people where they are. So yes, I take things home with me. But I also recognize when I need a break, and I take that break so that I can step away. Sometimes it happens in the middle of a day. You can't really control when you have the right energy. You can do things to give yourself energy at good times during your work week or work day. But when something hits you, you need to be able to step away and absorb it, process it, and be able to set it aside and come back to the work. So I've tried really hard to demonstrate that to people in the last few years, and to make it okay for other people to do that. And I find when we're caring for others in this process, they tend to care for you back, and you find this harmony between team members who can step in and fill the gap when you need a break, or vice versa. But it has to start with leaders showing you how to do it and showing you that it's okay. So things like, I have an open calendar. People know when I'm balancing my personal life with my work life. They know when I'm taking my mom for a pedicure or going to her retirement center to participate in an event there. If I do that, then I make it okay for everyone else to say, hey, I need to do something with my kid, or I need to do something for myself or with my spouse, or what have you. And so I think one of the things that I've learned is that you have to actually live and lead out loud and transparently, so that others feel comfortable doing the same for themselves. And by setting that example and making it okay for people, you have people show up in ways that are unexpected.
Well, I love that idea that your transparency allows the people who look at you, who look to you, and who work with you to show up differently also. Now, you kind of shocked me when I thought about your career history. If you were in your formative career years before FMLA, that's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And that you have, I mean, that, right? Like I've only enjoyed maternity leave, So when you think about that narrow space between work and life as a parent of a young child, a parent of a school age child, and your child is launched, she's 30, congratulations. It's a really huge accomplishment. But there's still this caregiving space that you're in that we see so many women in the workplace navigating. It's like that push and pull. You're also in a leadership position within your organization. So share a little bit about your internal pace and your productivity and how that influences the way that you measure performance for your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm a morning person, and I know that about myself now. I didn't always know that about myself. There were times where I tried to be like everyone else that I was surrounded by. A lot of people that I work with and always have are like night people, and they do these really remarkable things overnight. I don't process that way. And so I had to learn to embrace what works for me and my schedule, and arrange as much as I can the work that I do around when I'm most productive. Sometimes that means I'm productive on a Saturday morning because I don't have kids to take to soccer, and I can sit with coffee and not worry about like when I have to be on camera in a call. And sometimes that means that I need to take time outside of that, like during a regular work week, to do things personally as well. And so I try to encourage the people that I work with to do what works for them. What are the circumstances that are going to bring out the best in you? And, I have a wide variety of people I'm surrounded by. I have people who don't have children. I have people who are in the sandwich stage where they have little children and aging parents. And sometimes when you're in the thick of those circumstances, you can't see for yourself what you need to do. And so part of my job as a leader is really stepping in and having the conversation, like, what's possible? You seem to need breaks at certain points during the day, or, you may need to be able to work on things outside of normal working hours, because that's when you can be most productive, or when you can bring your best work to bear. And by starting that conversation and initiating conversations around what's possible, not what's expected during a narrow window of arbitrary timeframes, it helps people to realize for themselves how they can navigate when they have their best energy, when they can bring their greatest attention to the work at hand, versus when they need to turn their attention to other areas that deserve and need their attention as well. they're all professionals on this team. Now we have coverage needs. We serve customers and they expect us to be available during windows of time. But that's the beauty of a team. Not everybody has the same needs at the same time. And through open dialogue and communication, you can work out the schedules that work for people that also work for customers, and for the peer groups that our teams are working with in order to be able to do their best work. And so, I may have started my career when it was very rigid, and I had a hard time kind of getting myself out of that like rigid mindset. But when you explore what's possible and not what's arbitrary, you can really bring out the best in others and help them identify creative ways to get the job done most effectively. So it's really not about having predefined answers. It's really asking the right questions and just showing up for people in a way that has them want to show up at their best as well, even if it doesn't look like a typical 9 to 5 type scenario. So we focus on the outcomes, not the inputs. We try to remove barriers to getting to being successful. Like there are a lot of things that we do in the workplace that we've just always done for 100 years that don't make any sense. And so it's okay to just step back and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Let's remove it from the process, or let's change it so that it works for us. So there's a lot of that kind of work that goes on from a leadership perspective. And I find that when you take care of the team, they take care of the customers, but they also take care of you. So you get what you need out of that experience as well as a leader.
Debra, that's such a great testimonial for a level of courageous and strategic leadership that I don't think we get to see a whole lot of in industry today. And if if you're thinking about the trends that are being very widely reported for employment in the United States, 2020 shook the way that we did work. The narrow spaces of work and life became so blurred and overwhelmed and saturated. And what we discovered as working Americans in 2021, 22, and 23 was that when you give people the opportunity to have a relationship with work and life that makes sense for a high quality life, we get more. You've identified this. Now, what I see with your company, based on what you've shared about the leadership model, about your own experience and how you lead your team, your company seems to have adopted some of those best practices and really infused your organization with this. From what I'm seeing in the reports and the numbers out from the U.S. Chamber, Forbes, and Gallup is that we're failing again. The industry is squeezing employees and wringing them dry and taking away that ability to have harmony in your role, in your organization's culture, and particularly the way that your company serves HR leaders and industry leaders. You've given a lot of great advice. What are you seeing? And maybe what advice do you have for organizations who are struggling with that narrow spaces concept?
Yeah, I think, we've talked for years about wanting to make it possible and easy for people to bring their whole selves to work, but we haven't actually acknowledged their whole selves. And so simple things like appreciating people on their birthday, or on their anniversary, or when they buy a house, or when they adopt a puppy, celebrating with them in their lives what's important to them. We used to have predefined, this is what family looks like, and this is what the work week looks like. What I'm seeing in companies that are thriving and building high performing cultures is a high level of personalization at scale. So yes, you have to have some standards around policy and procedure, and you have to get the work done for customers. So if you're a hospital, you don't have the flexibility to have people just not show up on their schedule. You need to have mechanisms in place that allow for people to sort through their work and their life in meaningful ways, in ways that serve them. But in every environment, you have more options than you maybe historically thought that you did. And there are whole industries emerging to support people in those narrow spaces. So large companies we see investing in programs that help people navigate that, whether it's that they need emergency childcare because their child is sick and can't go to daycare, or they need help at home navigating, balancing kind of home management along with managing work and all of the responsibilities. So I see more creativity around how companies are thinking about what are the benefits and perks that people need in order to be met where they are, to give them the best possible chance to be engaged and to show up and thrive in your workplace. So recognizing the humanity and the humanness and the challenges and the beauty that all come with that, and celebrating the beauty, but also providing a safety net for the challenges that we all inevitably face, is becoming increasingly critical. And companies that recognize that are the ones winning in the engagement challenges today. So it's not a function of, return to office is bad. It's not a function of, remote work is best. It's recognizing that what you have serves a particular need for individuals, and you need to really form structure around supporting them and being successful in your environment. It's also important to recognize that what people need at one stage may not be the same as what they need at a different stage. And so we've got 5 generations in the workplace. Gen Xers like me engage differently with technology and feedback than Gen Z does. That's okay. It doesn't make anybody wrong or right. It just means that it's different. And so we have to be more creative and more fluid in the approaches that we take in doing things like providing feedback and providing tools and technology and providing solutions that help people feel honored in their personal needs as well as what they need to accomplish at work.
Debra, it sounds like you're describing human-centered leadership that individualizes the needs of the employee. And you created this pathway when you described some of the things that you see in your workplace, that when the employer invests and gives to the employee invests and gives to the customer, and the relationship becomes even more robust. So it sounds like what you're saying is that human-centered leadership reserves the right to get better.
Yes.
I love that.
You learn from what works, you learn from what doesn't work, and you just find the path together. And you win together with your teams. So, and it doesn't have to be huge. It can be simple things. It's the situation where when the employee has to stay home and is sick and you know that they have kids, you send them a gift card to order a DoorDash so they don't have to worry about, feeding their kids when they're not feeling well themselves. It's simple things that have people feel seen and feel honored as the full 360 humans that they are. They're not just workers. They're not just producers of output. They have all these other things that impact their ability to show up. So, and it's not one-sided. When you show up for your team in that way, they show up for you in remarkable ways as well.
I love that. So one of the pieces of my career that's been just so incredibly valuable is mentorship and getting good advice from people that I look up to. Now, you may have had a similar experience given your developmental professional years at a really interesting time in our history. So I'd love to give you a chance to kind of redeem some of the bad advice that you maybe received as a working parent and as an emerging leader in a period of history where, things were really rigid. So what's some of the bad advice that you got?
I got advice not to actually disclose that I was a parent or to disclose my plans to have more children. I ended up only having one, but I literally was told, quite honestly, by a VP of HR, not to communicate my plans to have further children, or my desire to, and to keep my personal life personal. Don't let it enter into the workplace. When you're here, you should be buttoned up. I started working when women weren't allowed, in the personnel manual, women weren't allowed to wear pants to work. They had to wear hosiery with their dresses and suits. Yes.
Okay. So for just to put that into perspective, a period of time where women's wardrobe was dictated by requirement to wear hosiery to work. Like, that's so wild. And when I look at the way that you lead now, the way that you inform culture in your organization, and even in some of your previous roles, being in a space where HR leadership and helping HR leaders do the good things they ought to do, that they want to do. We're in a completely different environment. The world is so different today. So you, I'm sure, have opportunities to really redeem that really bad advice. And what's some of the ways that you're redeeming that bad advice? What's some of the advice that you give the people that you mentor and lead about navigating the narrow spaces of work and life in a way that is really truly integrated and fulfilling?
So I think one of the things that I really struggled with coming up as an early professional in that environment is finding my own voice. I had this image in my mind that I had to either be a corporate person or I had to be true to my own beliefs. And I really struggled with, like, am I a good feminist? Am I carrying the flag in the right way? Because I, in my mind, thought that it looked a certain way to be feminist. And I thought you had to show up in a certain way. And what I learned, honestly, is that you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't have to be beating on the table. You don't have to be doing the things that other people do to have impact. You can have impact by honoring your own personal approach and style, by affecting the change where it needs to happen in the community that you touch. And so I stopped looking outward and I started looking inward at what is right? What do I believe needs to happen here? And how do I advocate for the people that I work with, whether I'm mentoring them or just working with them? I feel like as a leader, my job is to cultivate and be a steward of the talent that I'm fortunate enough to work with. And so the approach that I take is more subtle. I love to speak publicly and things like that, but it's really more about moving the chess pieces when no one is looking so that things move in the right direction. It's less about claiming that as your own win and more about counting the wins of the people whose lives or careers that you've touched and seeing them grow and thrive. And I think that's why I'm in leadership. That's why I feel like I was put here, is to be able to have that kind of impact. And so I get such personal satisfaction out of just helping people find their way, find their path, have barriers removed without having to, throw a parade for it or point at what the injustice was and how to change it. You can just go change it. So I don't know. I feel like I went down a rabbit hole there, but I think I got on a soapbox.
Well, listen, I'm coming with you on that rabbit hole because when you think about, why we exist and what our purpose is when we come to work, we really think that, work is good. We have talents, we have skills, we have intellect, we have time. When we can productively apply these things to a greater purpose, there's satisfaction. And I'm on a mission. I want people to have the best work of their life. This is it. Let's use our talents, every single one of them. So in the stories that you have woven together from your career and the impact I love that you said that you're counting the wins of the people you lead. That's what you're looking for. When do you feel like your work matters most?
That's a great question. And it's hard to pinpoint one thing. I do feel like I have the fortune of being able to see people's strengths that they may not see in themselves and to piece together patterns that lead to new opportunity. And so for me, I think it's when I get to have a hand in helping somebody realize either their ambitions or help them overcome something that they never thought that they would be able to overcome. And that can be in the workplace and that can also be in life. Because we are messy humans and we bring it all to work together. Sometimes it's helping people realize how to sort some things out in their lives that have them feel honored and show up and, for their families as much as for their work. But I feel like that's really it. It's being that person that can be counted on to see the opportunity and the strength and capabilities that somebody brings, even when they can't see it for themselves, and helping them discover that for themselves. That is so rewarding.
I love it. You can even see on your face just when you think about the experiences that you witnessed when people do get that win for themselves and they accomplish it. It's so incredible. And that's one of my favorite parts of the work that I do, is when someone has that moment where their life shifts because they recognize their dignity, they recognize their value, their worth. And, in reality, not everybody's dignity and worth is respected by everyone else. Sometimes there's fractures or bad behaviors or bad habits or bad cultures that we find ourselves in because we're the person to redeem them, to bring about truth and bring about predictable patterns of behavior that elevate the place. And sometimes we stepped into the wrong room. And so creating boundaries throughout the different stages of our career so that we can have the best work of our life is a really important thing that I know a lot of leaders work on, but I know that, a lot of developing emerging leaders grapple with. When do I put everything into work, and when do I put, less time into myself or my family or my health? And so I'd love to explore that with you a little bit. What are some of the lessons and the boundaries that you've put into place to preserve this best work of your life phase that you're in?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think this came about, it took me a long time to find that balance or harmony. I was diagnosed with cancer in early 2020. So when the world was shutting down, I was going through my own reckoning, I guess. And I had always been this human doing. There was no limit to what I could accomplish. You give me a goal, I'm going to meet it. You say it can't be done, I'm going to prove you wrong. I got a lot of joy out of doing that, but I was always in motion. And I faced, one, like mortality, but two, the fact that I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that because I had post-surgery treatments and things of that nature, but also the world shut down. And so I had to face the reality that I had always used staying in motion and being productive as a measure of my self-worth. And it was really hard to recognize that I was so attached to my outcomes and to what I could produce or how hard I could work. And I really spent a lot of time reflecting on, who am I? Who do I want to be? When I'm gone, what do I want people to remember me for? And I started counting the people that I wanted to have impact on, or that I had impact on. And when I reflected, the thing that made me most proud is that I always left people in a better place than when I found them. Not because they weren't capable on their own, but because I could give them a little nudge or open a door or help them see something in themselves they hadn't seen before, see opportunities. And that's where I really get grounded. And so I spend time focusing on, how do I care for me? And what does my schedule look like, and where is my self-care, and what does it need to be? Because sometimes self-care is going for a run, but sometimes self-care is sitting quietly, not in motion. And I had to learn, what is it that I need in this moment? It doesn't matter what I had planned to do. What do I need in this moment? What am I doing for myself today? There is a self-care objective for myself every single day. It may mean meditation. It may mean not working out. It's going to be a rest day. But I have to check in with myself daily in order to stay on top of it. Otherwise, I get sucked up in the pace of life and pace of work. And, I look back on all those years of really hard work and fast pace. And a lot of people, when I was reflecting on this, were like, oh, those companies took advantage of you. No, No, wherever I go, there I am with the same old crap, like my same old bad habits, my same old ways of working. Like this is me, not them. And so I had to really take ownership of that. And I have to be intentional every single day. Um, and it is hard because I would really much rather just be in motion all the time. And I think it's easy to kind of let that go, but that's my practice. Is every single day there is something self-care that gets addressed, whether it's a break or whether it's a massage or whether it's going to Pilates class. Um, you have to make that commitment to yourself daily.
Yeah, I love your answer. Well, thank you for just that, the extremely human element of that answer. And, journeying through health scares, health challenges, and that intersection of work and life in those moments. I mean, it's real. And I also am a recovering constant motion lover. I love work. I love work so much that I have to really be mindful of how much work I am doing. Like, when is it enough? And being in, my history is in HR. And so being in HR and being in leadership, you could finish everything on your list today and there's still 100 things for tomorrow. So you're never really done.
You're never done.
So for people
never
like
done.
us, oh my gosh.
No, you're not. I think about it like I like chocolate cake. I have a slice of chocolate cake. I can't have the whole cake. Like I have to pace myself. And
I know,
have to
you know
do
those
that.
brownie pans, you could just cut off a little slice every time you walk by. I mean, it's it's like that with work. And so, one of the things that I really think a lot about when we think about how do you have the best work of your life and how do you navigate the narrow spaces of work and life, I think boundaries are really important. And also planning for the anomalies, planning for when I have to shift that boundary, when I choose to do that something extra, when I choose to let go of that thing. And so I love that you've explained the reality of you're the same person everywhere you show up. And so you're always going to have to be challenged with that. And I wonder if we would think about, are there any practices that you've adopted that you might suggest to someone who is listening, who kind of struggles with the same compulsion that you and I do? We just love work. How would you advise someone like you or me to create that space for the narrow spaces of work and life to widen just enough to breathe with the people around us who maybe don't love work as much as we do?
Yeah. I think for people who have really high capacity for work and who really enjoy their work, there is something to unlock around ruthlessly prioritizing. And so for me, because I have this high capacity for work and I love it, I tend to I collect more projects along the way. If you work with a team, you need to be really clear, like, does it need to be done? First off, does it really need to be done? Does it need to be done by me? And does it need to be done right now? And in leadership roles in particular, if you have this tendency, you're being selfish if you keep it all to yourself. You need to identify where others can contribute in ways that are meaningful for the work that actually needs to get done. Not all the busy work because it's a good idea and at some point would be great to have done. So ruthless prioritization is one of the tactics that I try to practice on a regular basis. I will be honest, I'm not the best at it. I have regular check-ins with myself. So I allocate time to actually reflect on where did I spend my time? Where am I supposed to be spending my time in the next few weeks? What's not getting done? What's at risk? And reprioritizing. So taking that time at the end of every week or every other week where you reflect and make sure that you're incorporating the right practices, get back on track. If you go off track, all there is to do is just to get back on track, start again. It's not an issue. It's not shame. You just have to do it. I will say the other thing, totally unrelated to work, is when you're on vacation, before you come back, always book your next vacation. Always having something to look forward to that is just for you, that is going to be at the end of weeks or months of work. keeps things positive and makes it easier for you to build in those times because you've already paid for it. You're less likely to cancel it.
Yes.
And you have it to look forward to. And you don't plan it so far out. Like, just make sure that before you come back from your vacation, that you've got your next vacation booked, whatever that looks like. Pay for it or start the payment plan, and have it out there so that you have that to keep you in check and on balance. Use a therapist or use a coach. I'm a strong advocate of getting out of your own head. I come up with the worst solutions to my own like self-imposed challenges when I get into my own head. So even if you just have like a peer that you network with, that you can peer coach with, it goes a long way to getting you out of the cycle of talk that happens in your own head. It's a scary place sometimes. So that would be another recommendation that I have. And I don't do this myself, but I think it would be a better practice if I just had a recurring check-in on the calendar to make sure that that's happening, because it's easy to get stuck in your cycle and kind of downward spiral.
Yeah. That's great advice. You listed some really good points, some great considerations. So here's a quick response question. How do you describe the best work of your life? What comes to mind first? Yes, I love it. Okay, then tell me, when we're making life and work better for others, tell me what you're thinking about the narrow spaces of work and life, this concept that we can exist in harmony and have all the room we need if we're mindful about it and integrated. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there's no other time like now that we have that opportunity. And I'll tell you why. It's not because Gen X did anything great, but I will say, like, the millennials and Gen Z have opened my eyes and raised awareness to the importance of mental health, to the importance of balance. They've rejected bad leadership and bad work practices, like outright rejected it. And they're doing us all a favor by doing so, because they're opening the conversation to actually getting this right. We don't have to do it like we've always done it. And it's kind of dumb that we have, to borrow some of their, paraphrase some of their comments. And so I feel like we are at this intersection of the changing nature of work and the different options for work. It used to be that people would go to work at a 9-to-5 job and, spend 30 years there and retire with the gold watch for a lifetime of contribution. Now the gig economy and freelancing is just a standard. And I think in the future is going to be even more prevalent. I mean, it's already almost 50% of the workforce is in some sort of contingent or gig type of workforce situation. So the options exist today that never did before. There's a whole industry around convenience of kind of lifestyle needs. So you have the ability to design it in an easier way than you had to in the past, and you actually don't stick out like a sore thumb these days in doing it. So I think it's an exciting time from that perspective. We have the opportunity to get it right and make it better.
Excellent. Debra, thank you so much for your thoughts. It's not every day that we get to sit with an executive leader and hear about the best things about work and life and the culture you've created, the culture you participate in, the way you lead your employees, the way you lead yourself, the way you've navigated some of those really difficult and tender moments, and the way that you lead with transparency. I mean, an open calendar for an executive leader is a big deal. So, my hope is that everyone who's participating today, who's watching and listening, that they're walking away really thinking about how they are demonstrating human-centered leadership in today's workforce. You gave us great things. You had great insights. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
Thank you so much, Holly. This has been such a great conversation. I'm just so honored to be able to have it with you. And I just really appreciate the work that you're doing to actually help people navigate with power those narrow spaces.
Thank you. All right, Debra, thanks. Thanks for joining us in the narrow spaces of work and life. What do? I'm on a mission to help people to have the best work of their lives. I help leaders do good. I help managers be good, and I help employees feel good. And when leaders are good, employees are engaged, energized, effective. And together, we get to live the life we deserve. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on where to connect with our guests and sponsors and experience all things Narrow Spaces at narrowspaces.com, where you can gain access to this episode, subscriber extras, and more.